Now in CSS we can define which cursor is displayed when we hover over particular elements, or in fact we could use it in conjunction with other pseudo classes. So we might want to change a cursor when a link's being clicked or when a link's being hovered over, and perhaps change it from the default. So we're going to take a look at some of the different cursors that we can use. I'm not going to list through all of them because there are quite a few. We can also use custom cursors, but I'm not going to include this in the tutorial. It's relatively straightforward as well, making sure you use a backup, like a system default backup, in case that cursor isn't available. But anyway, we'll take a look at a few examples with anchor tags, and then we'll include something else on our page, perhaps just a generic div area, and see how we can create a cursor change when we hover over that. So first of all, let's take a look at the property itself. Now I'm going to apply styles to the body of my page, so I can just apply this to the body and change the overall cursor for the document. At the moment we've got nothing on our page, and we're going to keep it that way. We're just going to use our style sheet to style the body. So as long as my cursor is within the body of the document, the cursor will change to whichever I specify. So if you wanted an overall different cursor for your site, then you could use this as well. So let's go ahead and select body, and we'll go ahead and we'll use the cursor property. And that's as simple as it is. Now all you need to do is define which cursor that you want to be displayed. Now of course we can use auto by default, but this wouldn't accomplish much because that would just be the cursor that we automatically see. The auto value would be useful if you had set, say, a cursor for an overall document, or an overall element, and you just wanted it to inherit, if you like. Or not inherit, but be a default cursor. If you wanted to inherit, you could use the inherit property, which would inherit it from the parent element. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at changing this to something else. I'm going to use pointer, which is one of the more recognizable cursors. When I refresh, oh, nothing's changed. Let's take a look. There we go. So I've included HTML in my selection there, and you can see that the cursor has now changed to a pointer. This is something that you'd usually find when you hover over, say, an anchor tag or something like that. However, because I've applied it to the entire document, it now means that my cursor is just changed. So why is this useful in CSS? Why would we ever need to define a cursor? Well, for example, if we were creating a navigation list, for example, that didn't include anchor items, for example, it might include JavaScript event handlers, which probably isn't the best practice if you're creating navigation, but there's some times when this needs to be done. Other times would be when you need to set a cursor within something to show its action. For example, if we were to have an element that, for example, you'd allowed to be resized, let's just go ahead and click type div class equals resize, for example. This obviously isn't a great example because to resize an element would be to grab the outer ends of it. Well, you could say, as a better example, move. If you had this move element, we'll go ahead and set a width of 200 and a height of 200. And we'll go ahead and set a background color. You could go ahead and set the cursor to move, and this would display a system default cursor for moving an element. So if you were using JavaScript to allow this element to be moved somewhere, you could go ahead and you could set the cursor using CSS. So this is it's a brilliant way to visually display to the user what can be done with elements. Also, you could go ahead and change a text area, for example. Let's go ahead and create a well, not a text area, we'll create an input with a type of text. By default, this looks like this. We've got this symbol that's telling us we can go ahead and type in there. For example, you might not want to do this, so you could say input type equals text as the selector, and you could go and say cursor. Now we could do inherit here, and this would inherit the cursor from the oh no, it wouldn't, sorry. We could say cursor pointer, and you'll see that we have the cursor, or the pointer cursor here. So this is perfectly acceptable to do. It doesn't interfere with the semantics of your page. It's just a graphical thing. Obviously be careful not to overuse lots of different cursors if not required, because it could confuse someone. Now let's go ahead and look at an example where we could do this using anchor tags. So for example, we'll go ahead and create a link, and I'll just say a link to make things simple. Okay, so when we hover over this, we see we get this pointer that we've already used. When we click down, we have the same cursor as well. So this is obviously browser default. It's setting it to a pointer by default. Now let's say I wanted to change this. I could say a link, and I could say cursor, I don't know, we could pick absolutely anything at all. We could say crosshair, for example. And when I refresh, you'll notice that when I hover over, we get this crosshair icon here. Could be useful. Depends on how your site's themed. When I click, we have the same thing as well, because it's still a link. So when I click and and hold down, it's the same thing. However, we could go ahead and again use something like the active pseudo element for anchor tags, and we could say cursor auto. And this would just default to the auto. Oh no, it wouldn't. It would go to the one that's already there. We could say cursor pointer, and when that's active, you see that we go back to a pointer. Okay, so there's lots of things that we can do with this. However, they can be useless in a way. But essentially, that is the cursor property in CSS.